consecutive numbers, so they don't. Interesting.
Where's our copy? I should have a copy of the whole thing. Kristen, where's my copy of everything?
Check your email.
No.
That's an insight.
It's like a weightlifting exercise.
Yours is double-sided.
Nikki, here.
Five people.
Mark sent some comments out that we'll talk about.
Say five.
I'm wrong. But, so I,
I saved one just because of this.
Hello.
No?
I even saw the number.
I know. Being here.
And then David.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so,
Thanks for letting me know.
it's the same setup as last time. And then I also have, when it's time, I opened Rick's slideshows here in blue. So you'll have to go to view full screen or whatever,
You
but,
didn't get what you there?
and make sure that it pops up on these monitors because it's set to extend instead of duplicate.
Wasn't working?
Yeah, you just might have to move it on,
Oh,
might have to like
yeah, it'll be like,
pull it over and move it onto this screen to make it full screen. Anyway, so. There you go. Oh, thank you. Yes. Yeah, the notice is special meeting. The public notice is
Do you have the
special meeting. I'm not sure.
quasi-judicial statement?
I have a,
This is a quasi judicial hearing and the appearance of fairness doctrine applies.
That one.
do you know?
Yeah,
No, I don't have anything to.
I know, well, I've sent it to Steve.
right one right now.
I know it was on Robert's computer, but I don't know that we can really dredge that up.
What does he want?
The appearance of fairness doctrine statement. This is a quasi judicial.
Yeah. We usually have those on the agenda, don't we?
No, they're on like a special cheat sheet that usually gets provided to us.
It's just,
I'll write it
this
down.
is a quasi-judicial meeting, and the appearance, fairness, doctrine applies.
I have to come over to your house. This will meet 20 minutes. With cookies and you have coffee?
Oh, I got a lot of
Okay,
coffee,
then
yes.
we'll get some.
Let me know if you'd like, let me know if you don't like decaf, because I do, I have some of
No,
the.
after this many years of railroad, it's just warm. And warm is an option. As long as it's wet.
Okay, well, let's have a date.
What does it do? Any commissioners have?
Christine's gonna write something else. Have any conflicts
Have any-
of interest that the commission should be made aware of?
We're missing the speech.
It's going to be slightly different than normal, but it's still going to be good. Emily and I are crafting it right now.
I am too, so we'll see who gets the last and most elegant version.
I might read them, like I said, I'm just reading both.
Cover all the
See if we
bases.
could get it covered, yeah.
It'll work.
I don't know why I don't have, well, I threw a lot of stuff out when we finally finished that school. This was getting pretty thick.
He's done it enough times, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully you can read that.
All right.
Emily said it was okay, so.
It's like Randy's putting one together too.
He might have the
Might have the
actual one,
actual
because he used to be the chair.
Yeah.
Call to order. Call to order. Roll call, please.
Jeannie Carlson,
Here?
David Langworthy, Mark Nelson, Laurel Preston,
Here.
Randy Reeves,
Present.
Sean Schubring,
Present.
Nicole Truitt, present.
We have Mark Nelson sent in ahead of time that he wasn't going to be here. Did David?
I believe David did confirm with Steve that he wasn't going to be
Let's
here.
get it through real quick. Make a motion to
I motion to excuse the absence.
Second.
all four.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Announcements.
As you all have seen, Steve is not joining us tonight, so we don't have any director's announcements.
We don't have any, okay, so there's no director's announcements, no other ones. And tonight is 2 CMPs only. Okay, approval of minutes. Do we have any minutes to approve tonight?
Haven't been here.
They will be approved at your regular
At the regular
meetings.
meeting. Okay, so minutes will be approved then. Since this is a regular meeting, we will still do this.
This is a special meeting.
So we don't need to have, it's still.
You
to the
still
public.
follow the
Right,
agenda,
still
but
follow
it's
the
a
agenda. So,
special meeting.
Audience participation. At this time, citizens may address the planning commission regarding any issue related to planning commission business excluding public hearings, so not the CMPs, please. To ensure equal opportunity for the public to comment, the speaker's comments may be limited to 3 minutes per person per meeting. Does anybody have anything that's not related to the CMPs tonight that would like to speak? Okay, we'll close that.
Wait,
Oh,
The site plan review, the Cobalt One Trust project, agenda item 2 is a CMP and site plan review. So 2 files,
so that's still part of.
but it's
already
still a
scheduled.
part
It's
of a
still
public
scheduled.
hearing, yes.
Anybody else? Okay. So, on to CMP 1. See if I can get this. So the first one is 543. Is that correct? Seen it?
Yes.
543, okay.
Yes.
So, this is a level 2 tailored construction mitigation plan for 543 Overlake Drive East. Applicant is, come on,
Mr. Shen.
Mr. Shen. The summary to redevelop a residential lot by demolishing the existing residence and constructing a new single-family residence and pertinent structures. Work includes approximately 850 cubic yards of site grading and removal of one significant tree. Work will occur in a geographically hazardous area. This is a quasi-judicial hearing, and the appearance of fairness doctrine applies. Does any commissioner have a declaration of conflict of interest in this case? Nicole?
No.
no.
Randy? I do not.
No.
No?
No.
No, thank you. Nobody does? Does any commissioner or member of the audience wish to challenge any of the commissioners on the basis of these declarations? Nobody declared anything, but does anybody associated with this case want to challenge any of us commissioners in this case as it's quasi-judicial? case number CMP 17-005. Level 2 construction mitigation plan, 540 Lake Drive East.
Thank you, Commission. Sean Pesic. Oh,
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Great.
Thanks, Commission. Sean Pesic, planning consultant for the City of Medina. So as you said, we have two items on the agenda today. The first being the CMP and the second being a consolidated CMP and site plan review. So the first one, CMP-17-005. This is a redevelopment of a residential lot by demolishing the existing structure and constructing a new 5,755 square foot single-family dwelling with an attached garage that is 564 square feet and 656 square feet of decks and patios. And as you said, Commissioner, the work does include 850 cubic yards of grading, removing one significant tree, and the construction activities will occur in and adjacent to a geologically hazardous steep slope area. So the site is located at 543 Overlake Drive. This is south of Northeast 7th Street and east of 84th Avenue Northeast. Primary access to the site is at the east end of Northeast 7th Street, which is adjacent to Overlake Drive East, the intersection where it meets 7th Street. So as mentioned previously, the site is developed with an existing single-family residence and detached garage, and the site generally slopes down from west to east, and most of the areas east and west of the home are steep slopes with 40% or greater slopes. So the existing residence and detached garage will be demolished, and it will be replaced with a single-family residence constructed on the primary or the previous structure's building footprint generally. So as you can see, the steep slope area east of the proposed structure, and the applicant has indicated that existing fencing and vegetation do provide a visual barrier, so that will be used for site screening. So additional screening measures aren't required. Construction vehicles will enter the site from Northeast 7th Street, as you can see on the site plan. The applicant also will install a silt fencing around the limits of construction, and additional tree protection fencing will be installed, but it's only one for the additional tree. And no disturbance of the steep slope area is anticipated. The applicant had designated 3 parking spaces in the central portion of the property. If parking is not adequate for the number of vehicles on site, the applicant will be required to submit a parking plan that's approved by the city. The applicant has identified areas for material storage and vehicle staging. This is directly adjacent to the dumpster and portable toilet. And the applicant, like I said, has identified the portable toilet and dumpster, which can be easily accessed by the driveway that goes to Southeast 7th Street or Northeast 7th Street. The applicant is proposing a truck haul route that utilizes 84th Avenue Northeast, 24th Street, and Evergreen Point Road. This route does maximize the use of arterials and collectors and avoids school zones as much as possible. The applicant did indicate that no vehicles exceeding 26,000 pounds will be used for the project, and was not required to identify bus stop locations. A revised geotech report was submitted to the city's third-party review consultant and was approved on October 9th, 2018. The report did identify a number of recommendations, including the traditional BMP erosion control measures, limiting the size and type of construction equipment just because of the size of the site, and appropriate site preparation, including site stripping and the placement of structural fill. The applicant did include all other city-required construction mitigation measures, including the designation of a CMP manager, and the work hours that they provided on the application are consistent with Medina's requirements. Also including the limiting of vehicles when idling and the use of flaggers when backing into the site or exiting the site too. Other permits, right now we have the grading and drainage, administrative tree activity and the critical areas review approved. We're still waiting on the demo and building permits for the primary structure. So based on these findings, staff does recommend the approval, subject to 16 conditions that we've outlined in the staff report. Some of the highlights here, just the parking demands. If they do exceed the supply on site, alternative parking plan is required by the applicant. There is this on-site pre-construction meeting that's required by the city. The use of overhead equipment is prohibited, so if the applicant does decide to use a crane, or if there's a crane that's brought in, that will have to be addressed separately. And the project has to incorporate and comply with the recommendations on the geotech report. That concludes the first.
The overhead crane, how are they gonna, they have to, they're not gonna lift the trusses up. I mean, there has to be, are we saying size of crane? We're talking about a special type of crane? Because they use a crane to lift the trusses up. It's
Correct.
not-
On the application, the applicant didn't indicate whether a crane was going to be used.
We'll have to ask them about
Sure.
that, because I don't believe they're gonna lift those things up there by hand, so you have to have something.
Sure.
And then the geotech report, just because it's the most important part, probably what we do here.
Absolutely.
When, who, do we go over it correct? I mean, that was, I don't know how to, this is what I'm most concerned with, is the company that did it, it was completed to everybody, to staff satisfaction.
It was submitted to the third-party consultant who reviewed it and approved it.
And it was, okay, and they approved it,
Yes.
okay.
It was prepared by a professional engineer and reviewed by the city's consultant, so.
So that's probably the only hazard to the city is something doesn't work in the geotech area. The permits that weren't done, I don't, it shouldn't hold us up, but they're in process, they've been submitted, just haven't been approved.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that's where I'm at. Nicole, do you have any concerns?
I generally am somewhat concerned that the proximity to the water and the fact that we are overdue for shoreline and environmental considerations. And I was just wondering if there's included in the staff review of the application to reflect some of those considerations that we haven't yet covered but are due. If that
So
makes sense.
the city is not overdue on its shoreline master program updates.
Oh, okay.
That's due next year. However, that said, this property is not within the 200-foot shoreline jurisdiction, so those requirements would not apply.
Okay. I guess also with regards to the low impact development that we've been discussing, it seems to be somewhat close to the lake. Are there things that we should be considering?
The project has shown compliance with the city's temporary erosion and sediment control requirements, including best management practices to detain and filter water, cover exposed soils, et cetera, and they are vested to current regulations. So
The current LD.
the new LID codes have not yet been adopted, and any of the amendments that are currently being reviewed would also not apply on this site. They're for major parking lots, and what you'll be seeing next week is landscaping screening requirements, so they're not really applicable to construction mitigation.
Getting under the water.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Anything else?
No,
We can come back to you.
yeah, no, I was just wondering in general, like, the scope of our current LID and where we're supposed to be and where this is.
Because we
Well-
haven't got it done, we don't get to use it.
Okay, that's,
Yeah, we're remiss, they get away with it. And it's not they're getting away with it, it's just the way the rules are.
okay, yeah, I just wanted to be
Because
clear.
we're behind.
Yeah, I just wanted
They
to be
can't
clear.
apply, we can't apply laws to them, we haven't voted in.
And
Yes.
they are complying through the grading and drainage permit application with the city's adopted stormwater management manual that already has a number of LID requirements in it.
Okay.
So it's not like they're not doing anything.
Yeah, no, I
It's just managed
yeah.
separately from the code amendments that the planning commission is currently working on.
okay.
No other questions, we're good. We'll just keep
No, I mean, just in light of that, and considering like the special attention that lake and salmon populations are receiving, if there's anything in the best advice of the staff that should be considered with regards to what as a citizen group we could look at, or if they're already doing additional levels of consideration.
They are already complying with everything that we have the ability to require of
Okay.
them.
Today, yeah.
Yeah,
A
okay,
year from now, this will be much different.
yes, okay, thank you.
Randy? We come back to you?
No questions.
I'm gonna there too.
I
Jeannie?
will have a question about the truck routes. You're going up 24th, down Evergreen Point, then all the way back down.
Hold on. Let's truck up back up, please. Well, that's your question, but we all need to catch up to
Well,
you.
I was just what he
You're
said
fine.
verbally. If I heard him correctly. Am I right? You're gonna go up 24th, down 84th, and then and then you're gonna go back down almost to 84th again.
I may have misspoken on the truck haul route. No, it'll be coming.
I didn't see, I don't have the picture, so.
No,
okay.
so it'll be coming through Bellevue on 8th Street, and then go up through Lake Washington Boulevard, and then down over Lake Drive East, where it meets with the intersection of Northeast 7th Street.
So it's not coming, so.
Sorry, I must have
Well,
misspoken on
that's
that.
all
I
right, then
apologize.
that's the end of my question then.
Yeah,
It seemed very circuitous route.
seems backwards,
Good catch.
to say the least.
Laurel?
Okay, let's see, I have a couple of questions. One was just on page 28 of 214, the total floor area was listed as 3,718 square feet, and in other places it was higher, 5755 plus the garage plus the decks, and the project cost seemed rather approximate. I just wondered if we should update those, or if I could get an explanation about why there's a couple thousand square foot difference between those.
Are you referring to the CMP application, or are you referring to the notice of application?
So page,
Exhibit 5, 214.
Okay.
Exhibit 5, page 28 says total floor area 3,718 square feet, but Exhibit 1 and other places as well, the proposal says 5,755 square foot, single-family residence with attached 564 square foot garage and 656 square feet of decks and patios.
Do you know why that discrepancy? I don't have the reference in front of me, unfortunately.
I believe the smaller figure, if I remember correctly, refers to footprint, whereas the larger figure is total floor area. They have a second story, I think a second story deck, so they all have a partial top story. So that's why it's not quite double, but I believe that is what that comes from.
So floor area is the term that's used for the smaller one, but you're saying that's the,
Yeah, so during building permit review, we confirm all of that stuff. And that checklist that you're looking at is used to determine which level of CMP applies. So it's more of an administrative tool that we don't typically require them to update if we already know they trigger a level 2 CMP.
okay. Thank you. I noticed another discrepancy between something on page 10, which is in point N under miscellaneous. It says prohibiting animals on the job site. And then on page 35, Exhibit 5, it simply says animals brought to the site shall be controlled and not allowed to stray onto neighboring properties. So I was just wondering whether animals are whether they're planning to bring animals or not.
I think that language is from the code of conduct and it's from the CMP, correct? Is that,
The CMP form as a standard form language requires no animals on the job site, I believe. I don't actually recall off the top of my head what's in the code of conduct.
Okay, and I'd have to check to see which we're actually adopting if we, anyway, the applicant might want to, if it's important to them, they might want to clarify.
I'll make it
that.
note to all the description and we'll have them answer it.
Okay, great, thanks. And I just wanted to remark that we usually, and in the second case, we did see the actual mailing labels and addresses that the notices were sent to, and I think that was in, I didn't see it in this one. And I think, I had a concern about the parking, it's 3 spaces just doesn't seem adequate to me, so it sounds like there's already sort of a, in some of your remarks, you indicated that there may be some awareness that that's not going to be adequate, and a plan will be come up with in the future, but I'd feel better if we had that plan
absolutely.
now rather than later, because sometimes in the past that's been a point of contention. And then I just, in general, if you could bring up the site plan, if you don't mind. It's Exhibit 6, and I can't read the page number on this one, but it's, so it just,
40.
40, thank you. Page 40 of 214. I mean, this is possibly a naive perspective, but what I see is an outline of a new building surrounded by parked vehicles and a dumpster and material storage. And I'm just wondering if this is the best possible plan, if that's adequate for, say, emergency vehicle access for fire or ambulance or something.
No, that was still my number 1 parking. Because yes, and we're going to, again, today we don't get to do any of this, but we're going to review the entire CMP in the future, and parking is going to be one of them where we're going to zero it out. Because they're just, like you're saying, right now, they're by code, but we can also say that I don't believe with the steep slope that there's that much parking. Talk to the applicant when he comes up, and we will definitely be addressing that one, then with cranes.
Okay.
And the 3 items that have been brought up already, the animals. The mailing labels is you guys. Why, when wasn't the neighbors noticed? Every other time we've had the mailing list included.
Was it not included under the CMP application exhibit list?
It's the declaration
Oh, the declarations.
are
Okay.
missing, yeah. So,
We will make sure next time that the declarations are attached to the exhibit list.
can you state for the record, you can look in the files, but state for the record that it was noticed and when?
Okay.
Was this for the notice of application or the notice of hearing, Laura?
Yes.
Both, or just one?
Yeah, normally we get 2, it's in there twice, so I didn't see either one. Out of 214 pages, you normally see something like that.
We have it, well, they're numbered. We have it for the, we have it for the second case.
Hey, Laura.
We don't have it in the first case.
Laura,
Okay.
while he's kind of reorganizing, did you want to follow up on your comment about the emergency vehicles? I thought that question hasn't been addressed yet.
Okay, is that a question for
For
him,
Sean.
or is it for the,
Yeah,
okay.
it's a tight site, so I don't think that's really been thought through, probably.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last thing you said.
It would be interesting,
Vehicles and safety, how
it would be,
how we got on the job site.
for the record, it would be important.
Or another
So we'll ask them
resident,
on the-
Please ask them, my brother.
Sure, sure.
Yes, that's Mark's notes, yes.
How about not having a contractor? That's something you should talk to the applicant about.
It doesn't,
Doesn't
it's
matter.
not legal.
Oh,
It's not part of our purview. We don't tell them how to build it, we just tell them some of what they can and can't do in the process of building.
But I thought he had a valid point. It's kind of unusual to get to this stage and not have a contractor.
Isn't it? Yes, but without being used by us, it's kind of like we don't get to tell them color paint house. We don't get to tell them who the contractor is.
No,
either.
not who, but they have one. That's different, okay. all right.
They're just
Jeannie,
establishing.
I think Christine is going to address Mark's comments.
Okay, good, fine. That's why we should
Yeah,
read.
we don't get to tell them
No, I
that they
understand.
don't even build it. We're just giving them a box today on how to do it, the rules.
Okay, I understand.
Okay, so.
Okay. So for the notice of hearing, the declaration of mailings was signed by Craig Fisher on the 20th of September. And for the notice of application, the 24th of July.
So it just wasn't included in our packet?
It just wasn't included in the packet, but we do have it for the record.
You do
On
have it for
file,
the record?
yes.
Okay. So we can check that one out. Okay.
Could I just get your reaction, please, on the emergency vehicle access to the construction area, given all the parking and the dumpster and the materials storage that seem to kind of surround the building site? Did the city consider emergency vehicle access when it looked at?
So to run with this, we're constantly trying to make the CMPs better. So now when you automatically put in the truck routes, that actually was new a few years ago.
Okay.
To just do it, and we've been building on this when you can, like not during the school times. And the next progression is emergency access, a plan for emergency access or a plan for medical services. There's OSHA, WISHA, we know all that, they gotta have first aid kit and all those, but we're looking at just how are you accommodating within the confines of the city, emergency access? Was there any component to that in the city's plan?
I don't believe so, no. We didn't address emergency.
We'll
vehicles.
ask the applicant if they've got any component to that.
That's it for me.
That's Janet. Mark, or Randy.
So Sean, so it was very difficult to ascertain where the parking was, given the map that we had to review. It was
Okay.
essentially unreadable.
Okay.
So this exhibit's very helpful. So do you believe that 3 spots on this site, very steep site, is sufficient parking with the overflow being on Northeast 12th?
With the overflow, I guess the bigger question would be with the nature of the project, would 3 vehicles be enough to support this kind of development? That may be a question for the applicant to answer, but as far as accessing the site from over Lake Drive East, I think it would be enough for 3 cars, yes.
As far as being able to park on the site,
As far as being, I mean, you could probably squeeze another car farther back towards the north property line, if you had to. Obviously, site configuration is really limited from the steep slopes and the proposed house and the dumpster. But that may be a question for the applicant to answer.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we would like to, so the staff plan, we've gone through, we have some questions for the applicant. Could you bring them up this time, please? The representative.
The applicant, please. Yes. And if you could please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth?
Yes.
And could you please state your name for the record?
Yuan Jingshen. Yuan Jingshen.
Is Mr. Shen okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Shen, we have some questions for you. You might have heard a lot of this about the parking.
Right.
A lot of us have lived here for a while and been through construction of other houses, and the parking has become a very big issue. A 5,500 square foot house, I believe you're gonna have more than 3 or 4 workers. I don't believe that's enough parking. from people who, in other projects, not you, that the parking is inadequate and that we need a parking spot for any inspectors that come on site, or you personally to come and go, and I think that those 3 spaces are actually gonna be taken by people coming and going, not people working there. So we're asking is, can you bring all of your workers in from off-site?
Yeah, that's why we're thinking also for the, I think if they need more people during the framing stage, they probably, we counted probably need like 5 people.
Right.
Yeah, 5 people to framing. And so we also ask them to do carpool, this is a carpool, we emphasize that. But during excavation, that one, we know usually like 3 people, like with a machine, yeah.
But with excavation, will you have room for any cars? Because you're gonna have the machines.
Yeah, yeah.
You're working on, the site,
Yeah, just for the temporary, and we'll push the car. They can move inside a little bit. So we're trying to keep on the road is clean, kind of they can access to that point. And then kind of have to shovel with the car. And also the good thing is the owner owns this lot and also the next lot. So yeah, that's the one we might.
What you might do then is have him, because it's his lot, so he's writing an amendment with himself, that he can park on that lot.
Yeah,
Have him
if
write
needed,
something and
yeah.
bring it to the city,
Yeah.
because we don't believe there's parking available on this steep slope on this site for this project.
Right.
We believe that you don't have parking. And it's going to be in front of the neighbors, and it's just the way it happens. I've had 6 houses built around me, and none of them had parking.
Right.
And so it's become the hot topic, and so I believe you just come up with a solution, right there is, please have your applicant who owns the next lot, just write down, yes, you can park on my property, which is next door, and then park there, please, because we believe that you're going to use your site for building,
Yeah.
and for people coming and going, and construction vehicles and in and out.
Yeah, we're trying to work with the contract first. Make sure the carpool first, trying to eliminate additional parkings, especially on the street. And there's we see, and there's no space they can park on the street. So around that
Correct.
parking area.
So there's none on the streets, okay, so you understand, I don't know if we're communicating correctly. We're saying no cars, no construction people's cars on the site. You're gonna have to have contractors are coming and going, and we think that's where your 3 spaces are gonna be. Because you're not gonna be able to park your staff on site.
Yeah, that's correct. So we have to let them know the limited parking available. They have to manage that. Yeah.
So you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. Number 2, the overhead crane. Now, it says in the report that there's no cranes, but I believe you have to use something to even get the trusses up in that. So I know that when they deliver trusses, I build houses. So what I believe that it should say is that you're not gonna have a crane there like for weeks, but you might have a crane for delivery.
Yeah, this is kind of trying to get a definition for the crane. The time talking about this one, we thought it's like a standing.
Right, but you're not gonna have like a
Yeah.
semi-permanent crane. What I'm saying is, because the way it's documented, it says no cranes. I believe you're gonna have a crane there for
Yeah,
a
I think
few,
that
a
like
couple
a
of days.
boom crane, like
Right,
on
for
the
delivery,
truck,
yes,
yeah, for the
yes.
deliver offloading the truck, and also for the concrete, right? The concrete, if
Right,
you call that a
but it's
boom,
crane,
yeah,
right,
or
for the-
using that one, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
so,
But no like a standing, like freestanding, that kind of crane. Yeah.
so no more than 1 day, can we say that?
Oh, yeah, basically just offloading truss, I think that's the one, and also the concrete, pouring the foundation. That's the one that we saw using that.
And we might be getting too granular on this, in that the code might already accept that, but it's just something that we're taking exception to as a planning commission today.
Right.
So we'll see how staff addresses our concern. We have, it was asked, so I ask every question again. In regards to our shoreline management plan, we are currently going to be working through a new shoreline management plan and the low impact development. This is just a question, you don't have to do any of this, but what are you doing for low impact development? It's just a question, how are you helping us with our low impact development agenda in the city?
Yeah, that's why we're trying to keep all the steep slope protected. We're not touching that. And also you can see we are not widening the driveway. Yeah. We know it's a little bit narrow, but we are not doing anything trying to push outside of that the steep slope. And also we keep all the vegetation over there.
Okay, that was my question, because on the map, it's not clear if that's the proposed vegetation or the current vegetation, and it's staying intact throughout.
Yeah, on this side, we only move one tree for this whole development, right? Yeah,
Okay.
we put it on one tree is on the slope side, it's not on the slope side.
Thank you.
Good job.
And then back to, my biggest concern is the geology on the site. With your experience, do you believe this is gonna be a safe construction? When the building's done, it's gonna be safe?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanna hear, so, because if something happens, we come back.
Mhm.
So the question was also brought up about the square footage. Now, I would maybe address, but the 3,718 is the footprint,
It's a footprint.
and then
Footprint.
5,575 is the total.
It's the floor area, so two
Floor.
floor, yeah, two floor. It's a heated area,
Okay,
yeah. heated area.
thank you.
Uh-huh.
Another question was on animals. It's stated two different ways. There's not gonna be any animals on the site?
That's why we say, when you sometimes contract, right, they bring their dogs, right? Sometimes bring dog with their work. We believe here said there's no animals, so that's why, I mean,
Okay.
we're not let contractor to bring their
I
like,
don't
pets
wanna-
or something like that.
Yeah, I don't wanna misspeak, so I'll defer, but if the animal's in Medina, does it have to have a Medina license? If it's considered, is it overnight? What's the ruling on an animal?
I would have to go back to the code to review our animal licensing requirements.
Okay.
But our CMP does not allow animals to be kept on site anyway, so.
So how about no animals? Is that good?
Yeah,
Did
yeah,
you tell them they can't bring animals?
right, no animals, yeah, definitely.
That solves it easier.
Okay.
And then the emergency vehicle and safety component. This is where, as we're trying to evolve this, what
Right.
is your plan? And just say it to us, because that way, if it's said once, I actually still do a blue collar job, we have to do this every time we do a project.
Right.
But, what would be the plan for an emergency vehicle? If you have an incident, an injury, what would be your plan for emergency equipment?
Yeah, the plan is, right now, all the parking, we're trying to, this one is the car still can access the here before emergency. And then this two car, we also ask them to back in. They come in first, and then you have to back heading out, ready to head out.
So
Yeah,
you
this is our plan.
coordinated
Yeah.
Some forms of emergency, okay, and
Right.
that's what I have. Does anybody else have anything, Randy?
I think you covered everything
I
I've
think
read.
you covered it well.
Okay.
As regarding Mark's comments, I guess this is maybe this. Is it typical to have a CMP presented without a contractor known? Because my understanding was that things like parking, that becomes a big issue, and that really comes down to the contractor and relaying, say, workers from the contractor's office. Maybe if you.
I'll address it.
Yeah, thank you.
So Mark Nelson provided some comments with the same gist, concerned that there is no contractor selected yet. So they're not required to select a contractor until we're ready to issue building permits. We won't issue without a contractor, but we can take and review a CMP without a contractor. The contractor does have to sign off on the CMP, saying that he read and does agree to abide by all of the rules that are in the CMP and in the decision put forth by you all. If they want to change anything, they can apply for a revision to the CMP. So they do have that ability. It's staff decided unless somebody objects to the revision. It gets noticed, and if somebody rejects it or objects to it, then it comes back to you all. But the contractor doesn't have to be on board in order to review the CMP.
Okay, does this happen relatively frequently, just to get an idea?
It does happen. Some people want to get bids, and they have their architect or somebody else get started on the construction mitigation plan process, because it can take many months. And contractors don't like to sit around waiting for permits to get issued. So it does happen. We have reviewed it. It's not uncommon.
Okay, thank you. And, I'm sorry, I had one other question. On the erosion report, and I don't know if this is for staff
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
for
you
the,
can, that's-
it states that there's a moderate erosion potential. What are the different levels of erosion and maybe just what kind of measures are being put in place to protect, you know, the future house and the current workers and that kind of thing? Is it typical that a project that's stated in the geotechnical report as having moderate erosion potential, that's approved? What's the process for that?
So an erosion hazard area is a critical area, a geologic hazard area per our code. So their critical areas report addresses it. If there are any special requirements needed to do construction in the erosion hazard area, they're addressed by the geotech. So sometimes that might look like a limitation on the season in which you can do work, for example, or the amount or type of vegetation that you can remove, or how you have to revegetate to ensure that you are not increasing that erosion hazard. It's because of the steep slope. You know, there's just a potential for more erosion because it's a steeper site. So those things are typically addressed in the geotech report and in the grading and drainage permit specifically. That's where all of the conditions of approval related to work in the erosion hazard area will appear.
Okay.
So,
Just
Laura,
Just a
please.
moment. So Nicole's question reminded me that in the geotech report, I noticed that I'm quoting on page 49, under general earthwork recommendations, it says, "We recommend that site grading be observed by a qualified geotechnical engineer." Does that recommendation become part of this plan, or is that something you all, goes into one of the other permits, and has that been?
So one of the conditions of approval of this CMP is that they're required to follow the recommendations of the geotech report. I believe it is also in the grading and drainage permit, so it's redundant, but they are required to do that.
Okay, thanks.
Just hold up a little bit, and give us a minute. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Good. Well, okay, we'll start discussion. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.
Okay, this time we'll close the hearing. Okay, this is where we'll discuss a little bit amongst ourselves. This is what I've come up with is, we need a motion for these. So a motion to approve CMP 17005, 543 Overlay Drive East. We just need a motion to get started, motion to approve, and then we'll discuss.
Like if we want amendments or something?
Well, that's afterwards. First, we need a motion, and
I move to approve CMP 17-005 with all staff recommendations.
Second.
okay, we have a motion and a second. So then amendments to this, I have that we're not gonna have the parking. I need a little help with this. The staff come up and said they agreed to 3, but we're kind of saying that that's not gonna work. What do you have, Randy?
One concern I have,
How can we?
well, just one concern in general, is it seems like 12th gets all the overflow, and it's supposed to be in designated spaces on 12th, but almost inevitably it's not confined to those spaces. We have a lot of, 12th is almost impossible to park on 12th sometimes because of all the construction parking.
Mhm.
And so the concept that the applicant had to organize carpools is an excellent idea. In the staff recommendation, we use the word if parking demand exceeds the number of available on-site parking spaces, the applicant shall provide an alternative parking plan. Would it be unreasonable for the applicant to submit an alternative parking plan now, or within 30 days of approval of the CMP.
And I'm gonna keep run with that. What he was saying was, you know,
It's a little open-ended now, and
Right,
I know
right.
I know the intentions of the applicant are very good. It's just a question, can we get around that word if? And maybe Laurel has some ideas on that.
I think, I liked what you suggested, that we essentially, the way I understood it was that we essentially say we're not approving this particular parking plan. We need a different parking plan. And it, you know, it might include the parking on the adjacent lot that's owned by the same owner, or it might include carpooling, or it might include parking on 12th, but I basically share your feeling that the current parking plan is not adequate.
So this is a procedural question for Ms. Hayworth. Is it possible to add a condition for the applicant to provide an alternative parking plan within a specified time period after approval of the CMP?
You could write that condition and apply it. My concern would be on what grounds you have found this to be an inadequate parking plan, as we have previously approved CMPs with only 3 parking spaces.
the mitigating factor here is the steep slope. I don't believe you can park cars on that steep of a slope. And that's the mitigating factor. That's what's changed on this one, to answer your question.
Okay.
So I would put the question back to staff. In your experience, is that, based on precedent, is the parking on this site within the scope of what we've approved before? It's a relatively small site, steep slope. I've been doing this for many, many years now, so I've seen almost all of these CMPs for 6 or 7 years. This particular site seems particularly constrained. So it's potentially unique, but I can't quantify that. So was it unreasonable for us, based on precedent, to add that condition? If you believe it is, then the commissioners should take that into account in our discussion.
I don't believe it's unreasonable. We have had a number of discussions with the applicant. We've gone back and forth. I mean, this was submitted at the beginning of 2017. So we've gone back and forth on the specific site plan quite a bit. And this particular plan is the one where the applicant felt they were most able to accomplish the specific site layout. That said, it is very tight, and so I don't think it's unreasonable to request that they submit an alternative in advance.
And that's also with, the applicant already said that the owner owns the land next door, so they should be able to write something that says you can park on their property.
You've seen the letters of permission that we require, so that's typically if we would require that if they're parking on a property that is not already owned by them. So in this case, we didn't require it because they own it, so they can use it however they like. If it had been owned by somebody else, then we would require a letter of permission, is how the city has dealt with it in the past. But we could have something documented in the record.
What's the legal and just way to document what we just said?
Would it be possible to, since we have a meeting in 1 week, to request that, or we have to do it tonight? Okay.
Is the adjacent lot belongs to the same owner? Is it have a dwelling on it, or is it vacant property? In terms of how many spots you can park over there?
You come.
Sean, can you go back to the aerial?
We'll reopen the hearing. Hold on a second.
Well, it makes sense.
It's okay.
We have to reopen the hearing, so we're in discovery again.
Yeah.
We're discovering.
Right. The owner right now, he owns this one, he lives in this one, he also owns the next one.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it wouldn't be an issue, we're asking for, if he didn't own it, he would have to get a letter of permission, so, what, is there any way to document that we're expecting him to use his dirt next door, his parking spots next door?
We could have them submit a very similar letter of permission identifying the number of spaces available on the adjacent property. Would that,
So parking notice adjacent letter of permission, that's gonna be one of our, so we'll say that's one of our amendments, and that puts it back to the staff, is that correct? So we-
yeah,
we
so
will
they'll
be-
submit it to us and we will
Is that
review it.
acceptable?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so that will get you over our big hurdle there.
Mhm.
Okay, and then, does that work for everybody? The letter, so that,
Would you, Ms. Hayworth, would you put that into, would you want a time condition on that within 30 days? Is that reasonable?
I would say prior to permit issuance,
Right, so prior to permit issuance, that's a reasonable time period?
yes.
Okay.
And
that's Kristen, gets to write everything down, all them syllables.
I had a question regarding, so sometimes the properties with approved permits are then sold, and if that could possibly occur, how that would affect potentially then having a letter of permission for parking on the owner's adjacent
have a
lot.
letter of
He would
permission.
still
So
be
they
able
would
to,
have- right, that's what we're
okay,
asking
and that
for.
would carry
Because
over,
instead of-
that would be,
Correct, 'cause
carry
right now
over.
he owns it, so it's
Okay.
just mine, I'm doing it, but we're getting the letter so that it will become a condition of CMP.
okay.
And then we do have the other condition already in the staff report that if parking does become a problem, that they can submit an alternative parking plan.
An additional,
In addition to
Additional,
this
yeah.
letter of permission.
yeah, that's very good.
Okay, thank you again.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hold this for me. Okay, does anybody have an issue with the no animals on site? Okay. I'm not sure how this, we're walking a little bit on ice here. Cranes, I'm saying cranes one day, no overnight cranes in accordance with MMC. Can we word it that way? Cranes in accordance with MMC, because they're not getting a crane permit. So just, there's permit, there has to be the ability to drive in and deliver material. So I
You-
don't believe that saying no cranes means they're not doing a standalone crane that's there for weeks at a time.
Right, so normally the city requests clarification on whether their statement about no cranes on site includes or excludes a mobile crane or boom truck. I
I thought there was something about boom truck doesn't count as a crane because it's,
Wheels.
there was something in MMC about this, I believe.
It's not the same as a tower crane. We usually still request an overhead equipment drawing, so what we could do is delete the current overhead equipment condition and require the applicant to submit an overhead equipment drawing prior to permit issuance.
But I don't, okay, that's, but I think you're asking something that's not necessary. I think we need to review, because he's not asking for a crane. He's not asking, we're not going to that extent.
In fact, it's stronger than that. On
Right.
page 38 of 214 in Exhibit 5, it says no cranes, boom truck, or mobile
Right.
cranes are anticipated to be used
Right,
for
and
this
that's where-
project. So it's specifically,
Well, we can't make them pick up that stuff by hand, because I believe there's something, there's a line there in the crane, in the word, in MMC about cranes, that's, and I haven't memorized the whole thing.
So with CMPs, what we've typically done is lumped all of the overhead equipment together, so mobile crane or boom truck, because it still has to be operated such that the boom and any load does not encroach on adjacent properties or the public right-of-way. So we've treated it all the same, and we've said that overhead equipment shall be operated in accordance with the overhead equipment drawing,
Okay,
which
so
we could require them to submit if they are planning to use
it
a
looks like
mobile crane.
you probably stumbled on something we've been not getting correct for a while.
Yeah, this is an issue with the form that we're aware of, for sure.
So Ms. Hayworth, in the staff recommendations, number 14, it states overhead equipment is prohibited. So are you saying that
What will then-
sometimes it will be allowed?
If they request it it's allowed. If they state that they're not going to use it, we haven't done any review for it, so we prohibit it so that they can't bring something in that we haven't reviewed. So if they're planning on using overhead equipment, we require an overhead equipment drawing.
Does this make sense? We're actually trying to give you the opportunity to use the crane to deliver some materials. So we're gonna ask you to give us the, what is the exact term? The crane report,
We call it an overhead equipment drawing that has the location where the equipment will be operated from and the operational radius of the boom, showing that it can be operated such that it remains entirely within the boundaries of the site.
so we're trying to make it so that you can do your job. This is one where we've got some bad code and we're trying to give you a back door.
So given that, given what you just said, should we make any changes to number 14?
Well, he's stated that
We're gonna
he
have the overhead equipment.
will likely need it, so you can delete that condition, the current condition 14, and adopt a new condition.
Overhead equipment drawing, what is besides the overhead equipment drawing, what is the name of it again?
The operational radius of the boom.
So overhead equipment drawing, operational.
So could the assistant city attorney provide language for us to adopt relating to that? What we're just
For the
discussing?
CMP
Yeah.
or,
No, yes,
okay.
for this one, yeah.
Yeah.
And in the future, we're
Could
gonna
you,
do something.
could you write a sentence that we could vote on?
I can do that,
Thank you.
yes.
That's where we're at. Any other thoughts? Those are the three that we had, was parking, the animals, which went quickly, and then this overhead equipment drawing, number 14 with the operational radius. We'll defer to the council, that's why she's here. It's going well for you. Relax.
It sounds like it. So, applicant will provide notice of construction property.
Good catch.
Property owned by
Thank you.
owned by applicant prior to permit.
I think you've got something we've been missing for years.
Well, that was actually language
Provide
that
overhead equipment drawing.
Still,
the applicant
Operational radius of the boom.
in
but we've been not doing this correctly for a while. You're doing great work every week, every time. Thank you. I'm calling you out. Good job.
It was helpful to have someone actually read the whole thing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good, no, good. See, if I challenge both of you, we're gonna get perfect. You smart.
Sure you don't want it? It's warm in here.
I can get it off of the back real fast.
Okay, yeah, I can walk over there too.
Okay, I'm just cleaning it up so you guys can actually read it. Hang on just a second.
Thank you.
attorney, so this should work. Reject condition 14 and replace with the following condition. Applicant must submit an overhead drawing identifying location and equipment, or location of equipment and operational radius of boom, subject to director's approval.
I move to approve that language.
So we have 3 amendments. The parking, so Kristen, excuse me, cannot work together. Not working for me. So the parking adjacent lot agreement letter permission. And then the second is no animals on the site. And then the third is the condition 14 rejection and replacement with the following condition. But I'll give you this. Okay. So with those, we have the motion from Randy, Nicole seconded, to approve CMP 17-005. All 4?
As
Aye.
amended, you mean?
As
As
amended.
amended.
As
Yeah,
amended.
okay.
As amended. With amendments. Opposed? Okay, we passed it. There you go.
Okay.
We don't get a 10-second break.
We'll be in touch with a written decision.
Oh, that might feel good. Okay. So. Here we go. Number 2. This is a public hearing for a level 2 construction mitigation plan for CMP 18-017 and the exact words were project
Site plan review?
site plan review. Why is PL is what's PL stand for?
Planning permit.
Planning.
Permit.
Why doesn't it say? Okay.
It's just, it's an internal filing
You
feature.
Just say PL.
Yeah.
PL 18-035, 7747 Overlake Drive West. Bless you. Property owner Thomas Gores, trustee of Cobalt One Trust. The applicant is Rick Chesmore of Chesmore, and Buck Architect is the agent. This is a quasi-judicial hearing, and the appearance of fairness doctrine applies. Does any commissioner have a declaration of conflict of interest in this case? Nicole?
No.
Randy?
No.
Neither do I.
No.
No commissioners have a conflict. Does any commissioner or member of the audience wish to challenge any of the commissioners on the basis of these declarations? Does anybody in the audience wish for any of us to not be here? Or have a reason for us to not be here? Thank you for that, because you can only lose 2. Or 1.
I'm not sure myself.
Yeah. With that said, we'll open.
Go ahead and call.
Yeah, Sean from OTAC, please give us our staff recommendation.
And
Thank you, Commissioner.
for the record, Sean is still under oath.
I'm still there. So yeah, we have a consolidated review of the level 2 CMP and site plan review. For this project, we're looking at a redevelopment of the residential lot by demolishing the existing structure, constructing a new 6,441 square foot single-family residence with attached garage, decks, and patios. 11,640 cubic yards of earth will be graded, and we're looking at 7 significant trees removed.
Exporting 1,960 cubic yards. Can you skip that up?
Oh, sorry.
Just for the record.
For the record, exporting 1,960 cubic yards of it.
And just for Randy, read the last one.
Removing 7 significant trees. So the project does trigger a site plan review due to the lot size, which is at least twice as large as the gross site area of the smallest abutting R-30 single-family residence property. and the project does trigger a level 2 CMP because of the cost exceeding the 2018 threshold and the total quantity of excavated soils. So the subject property is located in southern Medina, accessed via Overlake Drive West and a private lane. There are 2 private lanes, one on the west side and one on the east side, but we'll get into that in further slides. So the southern portion, we're changing the orientation of the lot. The southern portion of the lot towards the lake is currently occupied by a 1-story single-family residence, and the house is surrounded by landscaping and hardscaping, including a lawn to the north, which you can kind of see on the larger portion of the lot. And there was a lot line adjustment too that was approved, I believe. The site's grade slope from north to south to the shoreline of Lake Washington, so it's a very gradual slope north to south. So the existing single-family dwelling, as you saw in the previous slide, will be demolished and will be replaced to the north by a single-family residence that's currently, most of it's on the grass lawn. So regarding site access, primary construction entrance and exit will occur on the from the west private lane, and there is a secondary construction exit to the east. As you can see, the secondary construction exit that will only be used if constraints exist on the western lane. There was a public comment that we'll address later on, but just for the record, primary construction entrance and exit is through that private lane to the west. And the contractor has agreed to coordinate site configuration, scheduling to maintain private lane access at all times, and has agreed to post the signage along the private lane prior to construction and demolition. Regarding site screening, the applicant indicated that fencing and vegetation do not provide a visual barrier, so a tall fence has been proposed around all sides of the property to provide adequate screening during construction phase. And it's hard to see, but there is a line that goes throughout the property lines. The applicant will utilize the existing lawn to the north of the proposed structure for material delivery and vehicle staging. So they will use the existing asphalt and concrete from the west private lane, and will have the trucks come in. There is a turnaround too, so the trucks can exit out to the west lane, and the material storage is to the south of the vehicle staging area. There's a dumpster, portable toilet, and construction trailer to the south, north of the proposed parking area, and that's easily accessible for servicing from that existing concrete and asphalt. And I believe that's the current driveway to the residence that's standing today. The applicant has proposed 15 on-site parking spaces in the location of the existing home. Existing asphalt and concrete will be utilized to access this parking area, and temporary gravel will be laid for the construction parking. And we lost it.
Oh, we're back on one side.
Okay.
There we go.
For truck routes, the applicant is proposing 84th Avenue and Northeast 12th Street and Overlake Drive East as the primary truck route. And this does maximize the use of collectors and arterials and avoids the school zones as much as possible. Medina Elementary School is directly north of the project site, but we believe that the applicant did an adequate job to, again, maximize arterials and collectors to access the site. The work hours are consistent with Medina's municipal code. The applicant didn't indicate on the application potential earlier start times. So it was documented there was a 6:30 a.m. arrival time Monday through Friday and a 7:30 a.m. arrival time Saturday, but the applicant ensured that these arrival times apply only to the superintendent and the foreman only, to unlock the gates, put up signs, and et cetera, so there won't be any construction activity. It's just the contractor arriving early to set up. And then the use of flaggers as well, in and out of the private lane to the subject site. So the city did receive one comment on the application concerning the use of the private lane to the east. In response, the applicant held a owner-hosted neighborhood meeting and reevaluated the site coordination regarding the access of large vehicles for construction, and it was decided that the primary route would be to the west private lane as shown on the site plan. It's also important to note too that the use of the east lane will only occur, like I said before, if constraints on the west lane exist. For other permits, we do have 2 on hold right now. The administrative tree activity, that should go through, that should be approved soon. There was a delay with the revision sent to our tree consultant, and then we are still waiting back on revisions for the grading and drainage permit, and the critical areas review was approved as well. So we do have a site plan review, like I said, and that really is to evaluate the placement of the primary site features, and in doing so, reduce the negative impacts to adjacent properties. So the proposal is consistent with the municipal standards for R-30, the dimensional standards for R-30. And the proposed residence is designed to meet the dimensional standards of that zone, and that includes all setbacks, heights, structural lot coverage, and the home is proposed north of the existing structure, and continuous communication with the neighbors has enabled a mutual understanding of the reasonable exception for privacy, or expectation for privacy.
Can you say that again? Sorry.
Sorry, the home is proposed north of the existing location, or sorry, the proposed home is located north of the existing structure, and there was continuous communication between the applicant and the surrounding neighbors to enable a mutual understanding of the privacy expectations. So for the first list of criteria, we have the proposal minimizes visibility of the buildings from the perspective of adjacent lots, and the proposal does not create significant privacy impacts for adjacent property owners. We found that the proposed residence is centrally located with that lot line adjustment and is built within the existing sloping site terrain. Again, I said before, it does there's a gradual slope, so that does help as far as privacy concerns. The residence does comply with all setback height and structural impervious limitations set forth in the code. And the landscape proposed does ensure privacy and security while minimizing noise. The second criterion, existing landscaping is preserved. The applicant didn't indicate that some trees will be removed due to development activities, but ensured that no trees greater than 24 diameters at breast height on the property will be removed, so all of those trees will be preserved to a reasonable extent. And again, the new landscaping features maximize privacy and limits noise to the surrounding neighbors. So for site placement measures, the site is accessed, like I said, from 2 private lanes, one on the west side, one on the east side, so that will kind of minimize the disturbance to any particular neighbor as far as access. The general exterior lighting is limited to only security lighting implemented when necessary, and parking is available at the west and east ends of the driveway access for resident cleaning and groundskeeping. As far as complying with any other applicable requirements, we believe that the project does comply. And we do recommend approval based on 20 conditions listed in the staff report. Again, if parking demand exceeds the on-site supply, a alternative plan is required by the applicant. The use of overhead equipment is, it must be, the use of overhead equipment must be in accordance with the drawing on Exhibit 11, which was provided in the exhibit packet, and then pre-on-site construction meeting is required. That is all that staff has.
So there's currently not an alternative parking plan, it's just if...
This one has 1.4 acres, this one has parking.
Okay,
Yeah.
so,
This one
got it.
actually
15 parking spaces.
Okay.
for once.
Yeah, so adequate parking for the site.
Okay.
And then go back.
Yeah,
To
yeah,
answer your
yeah.
question, but when you do, realize this is 1.4 acres. This isn't
No, I get
parking.
that. No, my question was more, that slide you were just on regarding the 20 conditions for the staff. So that's this will be done upon approval or before
Go to your,
staff approval?
the different, the grading, drainage and all those, and I didn't see a geotech on there,
There are no steep slopes,
so the geotech,
so there's no.
no determination of that.
Okay.
Is this what you're asking about?
Yes. So it says if parking exceeds the so this is as written, if they've,
If for some
If
reason they
for some
exceed
reason-
parking,
okay,
Well, this one should be good.
okay.
Normally, I'm right there, as a matter of fact, on the R30 and less, when we redo this, I'm gonna say no parking, no on-site parking. This one actually works.
Yeah, so I'm saying, is this a work that needs to get finished, like the 20 conditions? I'm saying, is
these
that
are-
something that needs to get written, or that's as included in the report currently?
we are approving it based on the condition that if parking exceeds their supply, they will have
Okay.
to provide an alternative plan.
Okay, thank you.
Randy?
So Sean, you, under 16, you say overhead equipment is in accordance with drawing in Exhibit 11. In the staff, in 16 here in the staff recommendations, it says Exhibit 5. I'm just
It should
wondering-
say, this is a mistake, it is Exhibit 5, not Exhibit
Got it,
11.
Okay, and,
And it should be provided under Exhibit 5 in
Got
that
it.
packet.
okay, and then under the work hours,
Mhm.
unlike the previous CMP, we had the start and stop times.
So go back to your slide with that, because there's,
Yeah.
right here,
So in the previous one, we had, it spelled it out. In this, in staff recommendation 3, it doesn't have the ending times. I was just curious, in the previous section, it has the beginning and ending times, but in the staff recommendation section, it only has the start times. I
Okay.
just wanted, was that just an omission, or
It may have been an omission,
Or
we should
do we
include this
do-
during.
do we refer back to the staff analysis?
Probably refer back to the staff analysis where it clearly states the start and end times.
Okay. We can
Could that be
We can
changed?
clarify that. It's-
Okay.
So, Randy, if
Yes.
you don't mind, since they're proposing an early arrival time, this is specific to the time between their arrival and their work start time. The work start time is as per the noise ordinance. So we don't, or the work start and end times are per the city's noise ordinance. So this is just specific to that half an hour when they're on site, but they're not authorized to be working.
My confusion perhaps is on Exhibit 1, page 5, the work hours. It's very clear how it's spelled out. But then we go to the staff recommendation number 3. It isn't as exhaustive. It doesn't reference that earlier start time, nor does it reference an end time. Can we go back to is it necessary for us to change the staff recommendation to correlate with the staff analysis?
I don't think that it is necessary. If you want to, you can, but
Okay.
I don't think that it's absolutely necessary.
If something was posted on site, would it just have the start times but not the end times, as it's shown in recommendation 3? Or would someone have to dig for the staff analysis?
we defer to MMC.
We would defer for the end times to the noise ordinance.
Yeah,
It's-
which is, but for the applicant, I'm not seeing anything in recommendation 3 that relates to their earlier start time. Staff recommendation 3.
I'm getting confused between start times and arrival times. I think the intention of this
There's
point
people
3,
that are coming to set up, and then there's work times, and
right.
so they've asked for people to come early and set up, but is that work?
I would argue that it is, because the arrival of some of the contractor trucks are quite loud in and of themselves.
That was going to be my question, is
Yeah.
6:30 a bit of an offense to the neighbors? Anybody that they're driving. That's, 'cause you know, I understand coming earlier and starting later, but I don't remember seeing a 6:30 before.
We have seen it before. It's not typical, and we usually ask for justification or for them to revise it. They assured us that it was only for the foreman and the site supervisor, just to get, like to do a site walk and get ready for the day. So no actual work would occur.
I understand that, but you still have cars coming at 6:30 in the morning, right by the neighbors, and so I'm just curious whether that's
Yep.
a problem or not for the neighbors, not for the site.
We didn't receive any comments on it, but if it's not acceptable, then you can prohibit arrival before 7 a.m.
Let's ask.
Well, I'm just raising the question
Yes.
because it would concern me if I were the neighbor. So,
Sure.
I was just wondering, along the lines of the public, there's two things that occurred. My understanding was there's public comment and then discussions with the neighbors. So I was wondering if that could be summarized, and if issues like the 6:30 arrival time had been discussed in the neighbor considerations.
We can ask the applicant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sean, did you get any calls or other informal types of communication?
I did not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Sean?
I had two questions.
Keep
Is that
going.
okay?
Yep.
Did anyone?
No, we're
All
starting,
right.
we start with you.
I think these ones are for Sean and not for the applicant. There are 7 significant trees being removed, but you also said anything over 2 feet at chest height is not being removed. Just for the record, everything's in accordance with the Medina tree code.
Everything is in accordance.
Tree permit 18-032.
I just wanted for the record.
Sure.
And also, why is the tree permit on hold? And procedurally, is that something that when the tree permit and the drainage permit are on hold, would a CMP be approved?
It can be approved, but I'm not sure if building permits would be able to be issued until those permits are approved.
Correct.
Okay.
But as far as the tree permit, I know there were some revisions that were sent to our tree consultant, and like I said, there was a mix-up. I was actually responsible for holding the files inadvertently, so he's currently reviewing that set of revisions and should be able to process it and approve it within the coming days, hopefully by the end of next week.
And my second question was regarding the construction parking on the southern lawn. How far from the lake is that, and what kind of mitigation measures are being taken to protect runoff from occurring from the actual parking zone into the water?
As far as protection of the lake, I know there's some silt fence around. I know so there's a silt fence that surrounds the property along that area for the parking. I'm not sure if the applicant has any proposed measures as far as beneath the parking lot where the gravel is. I don't know if there's any sort of erosion practices or erosion measures. That may be a question for the applicant to answer.
Is there something that's traditionally asked for lakeside construction from the city with regards to mitigation measures like hay bales or something larger than the silt fence?
That's code.
So we require them to keep everything out of the shoreline setback area. And then other than that, they're required to follow our TESC and stormwater management requirements.
Okay.
So that's mostly dealt with in the grading and drainage permit. And
Which is not yet approved.
it's not yet approved. The measures are pretty standard. It's like sort of like a toolkit kind of thing.
Is that,
They won't get a building permit until it's approved.
Right.
yeah, so, but I mean, I feel more comfortable having seen like what is actually included in the drainage permit before we vote on it. And is that something that, like, just something like adding hay bales or requesting that existing vegetation is intact during demolition, it can be removed later? Is that something that we can ask to be added to a construction mitigation plan?
So If it's available, we can include it. It's a separate permit with a separate processing timeline. It's all related under the same project, but we can't delay the processing of one permit just because we want to make sure another permit has been approved first. So we usually provide a description in the staff report of the kinds of TESC measures that would be provided, like the silt fencing, straw wattles, catch basins and inserts, that kind of thing. And those are all options that are available. I believe the applicant has his contractor here, and he can go into which mitigation measures he's specifically planning on implementing around the parking area.
Question? We'll come back to you. Is he done, or-
With regard to like the public comments that were discussed with, I don't know if it was officially public comments or discussions with the neighbors regarding east and west lanes. How far from Medina Elementary are either lanes, and in this, like, what's considered the safest regarding the children at Medina Elementary? Like, is it, so there's the neighbor consideration, but also proximity to the school consideration?
The public comment didn't address, or it didn't really specify whether or not it was directed towards the safety of the kids or for the, I guess, the peace and quiet of the
MMC that answers, I believe answers your question, in that if it's within a certain proximity to the school, there's requirements. So that would already be part of the code. I believe it's been legislated what you're asking about. It's part of MMC. If you're building within a certain distance of a school, there's certain hours and there's certain other requirements. So just like everybody was noticed with, where was I here, the school is one of those.
Okay.
And if they're within that proximity that's in MMC, then those rules are already enforced.
Yeah, I guess
Commissioner, are you concerned that those rules haven't been applied in this case?
No, my question is, because there seems to be some flexibility in usage of either the east driveway or the west driveway, so this is in addition to whatever MMC codes are. This is based on the preference of the residents in the neighbor area, and I just want to make sure that that preference doesn't outweigh considerations for the kids at the school.
There are conditions of approval that staff has recommended prohibiting truck movement when children would be walking to or from school. So it shouldn't be an issue.
Times when the kids are, when school's starting in the buses, so we have the no truck time.
Yeah.
I'm trying to accommodate what you're asking. I'm not sure that it's not already legislated is what I'm getting at. I think it's already been done in MMC, in the code, the municipal code, that if you're within so many feet of the school, and then we also, in the staff report, we've been doing this for a few years now, saying that within the start and stop times of the school.
No, I get that, but I also understand that trucks don't always come and go during, like, sometimes they might actually end up coming outside of those areas, and I just want to make sure that the consideration, based on the public comment, that somebody's also looking out for the school. Like, let's assume a truck arrives outside of the specified times, because that occurs. We live in a real world. I mean, you can specify that this will happen, but we can also make sure that the logistics are such that even.
So how do we accommodate what you're asking?
No, I'm just wondering. My question was literally where are the driveways relative to the school, and I wanted to know what the comments were regarding use of those driveways.
Do you
And
have Can you go back to kind of the global, the largest picture you have, please?
Who wants to comment briefly on the discussion with the neighbors?
I can wait as well. Honestly, like, I don't even know if it, like, I don't know where the school is relative to the driveway. That's all I'm asking,
Can you
really.
point to the school?
Yeah.
It's in the top.
Is it upper right?
Correct.
Okay.
Not quite to the right. but
Okay, that's all I really, I just wanted to make sure we didn't accommodate neighbors' concerns at the expense of making it slightly worse for the kids.
Right.
But it seems like it's offset from the school anyway. That was my primary concern.
Okay.
Thank you.
We kind of got a little bit out of order here, so let's just continue
Sorry.
with these questions first. If you have anything right this minute, we'll come back to everybody. Do you have anything right
No questions.
right this minute?
No,
Given
I'm-
before the applicant?
No.
Questions before the applicant? Okay. Can we get the applicant up?
Yes, so they should get distributed to the commissioners. And we can
Them to the record.
I was right behind you. That's committee.
I'll meet.
Oh, wow.
Are you familiar with Bluebeam at all? I don't know how to get the full screen.
Yes, thanks.
This is a little bigger.
There's enough, if not, I can get mine up. Share. Excellent, thank you.
Hold up.
Wow, okay. We have enough for everybody? Thanks. Okay.
Thank you.
Why is it so difficult? I think in overview. Christina, do you know how to get the full screen on the Bluebeam? It's not.
Wait till you see.
Which one's going for site plan or?
We don't mitigate that either. We don't need to tell them. I'm happy to get to the pictures, but that's not our purview. No, we're not mitigating landscaping.
See, it says C green plan.
Wow.
I don't have a label for it.
What's in here?
If you do need to point, it's better to use this number, but please watch out for you.
Okay. Might have to go back and work, so.
Well, I have to say, this
This is
is,
pretty.
in all our years, this is the
Not
most
very often we
impressive.
get show and tell.
Good
I
job.
mean, it's-
Well, that's good.
We-
We'll
we
we'll keep
usually-
it brief. We just-
Yeah.
So, do I need to be sworn in?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Christina?
So, raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
And can you state your name for the record?
My name is Rick Chesmore. I'm with Chesmore Buck Architecture, and I'm the owner's representative, the consulting architect, and I'm here tonight with the prime architect, Christy Hansen from Christy Hansen Architects in Palm Desert, California, and with Toth Construction, they're a general contractor. So I'll keep this brief. Site plan review, I thought we'd review that initially because it's a bit of an overview of the project. Might help with some of the questions you had earlier, so. Obviously, the vicinity.
Can
and
we
you can
wait, sorry, just a minute, are we gonna be, you're asking council to consider these, for the commission to consider these documents?
These are slides to basically talk about our project, just for site plan review.
The ones that you
specific-
just handed out?
Yes.
Yeah,
They
so,
are already part of.
Are they
the-
already part of the
They're
record?
already, they were submitted, this is the site plan review package.
I just wanna make sure that
Sorry.
they're already in the record.
Yes, yeah,
So-
and also the CMP Level 2 document has been.
It appears to be just a larger format of what we already have.
Excellent,
Yeah.
just making sure, thanks.
So obviously you can see our location tonight, and then we're just to the east a bit, and the site is accessed off of Overlake Drive West. how do I go to the next slide here, Sean?
I did. Do you know how I exited? I know, I don't know. Sean, what did I do?
We'll deal with this outside.
I have to just exit out.
Completely come back?
Isn't it kind of unusual to see this kind of configuration? I know, but yeah, but still, this belongs to somebody else, is this?
So you can mount?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just unusual to see that
she,
configuration.
I'm smiling. It's adorable.
Yeah.
Where's that view?
No, 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 we moved in, we lived in Brazil for many years before the internet. Moved in 1980. Weird pictures. We lived up in Pine Hill forever. Stayed in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I think it's what I've done to my 2-year-old holding a baby. Sorry, we'll just use Adobe, whichever is available.
Oh, you're welcome.
Do you want to do the full screen mode on this version?
I think that works, right?
Yeah, for Acrobat.
Is there any red in there?
Little, always changes.
Yeah. Yeah, same. It's like jet black and then red tone, like
And then, let's see, then I can just page? Yeah, just page, okay. Okay. Sorry about the little delay. So the second slide, excuse me. So, the owner purchased 2 parcels, which you'll see here and here, and with access off Little Lake Drive, there's an access easement on the property. And in 2016, there was a residence on what we're calling parcel B, and that residence was demolished. And currently on parcel A, there's a residence, and the owner currently lives in that house. Oops. So the owner combined the 2 lots in 2007, and also completed in early 2007 was a new dock, a new beach.
7 or 17?
2017, excuse me. A new beach was installed with work to the bulkhead, and also new shoreline plantings was completed in 2017. Existing site, I'll just run through these real quick. You're looking from Overlake Drive west to the western access lane. You can see it's heavily vegetated on the west side of the driveway. And then leading you into the site where you're actually back up against the northern property line, the camera view out. The second view is along that northern property line looking to the west. Again, you can see it's heavily vegetated. Image 3 is of the kind of southwesterly property line, and you can see several trees here. There are 6 of the trees of the 7 that we're removing that will be along the western property line, and those are in the development area. 4 is looking, again, from that northern property line, looking towards the existing house to the west side, and to the east side is the residence directly adjacent. Number 5 is looking more to the southeast. Again, you see the residence adjacent to the property, and you see some heavily vegetated area. That will be maintained and pruned, that area. Image 6 is looking then towards, from the northern property line, looking east. And again, you can see some of the vegetation along the eastern property line. Again, all that stays as pruned. Image 7 is looking from the new beach area that was installed, looking back up at the current house. That will be demolished with this project. And image 8 is of the new shoreline plantings, the new beach, and the new dock with the roof of the boat.
You said that was 2017?
Yeah.
So obviously all of the 2017 rules.
Yep. Okay, so this one here, I'll talk just quickly, but there's a lot here. So the site plan review is required because our lot is greater than 40,000 square feet. We're a little more than 62,000 square feet when you combine the 2 lots. And we're twice the size of the smallest lot touching the subject property, which is the property directly adjacent to the east. And it's approximately 28,200 square feet. And all of the properties here are zoned R30, minimum 30,000 square foot. And with a structural lot coverage of 21%, we've actually elected to take the height bonus, so we're designing a house with a lot coverage of 13%, so much more condensed footprint area. And the building setbacks, are 30 feet from the north property line, 20 feet on the sides, 30 feet on the rear. Again, the 20 feet continue down, and then there's actually a string line across the houses here that on the off the bulkhead. What's significant about that is that we've elected to design the house more central on the lot, so we're approximately 49 feet from the northern property line to the corner of the house on the north. We're about 30 feet from the eastern property line to the nearest point of the house. And on the south property line, we have a 30-foot setback, but we're about 50 feet where the house is. We've got some additional landscaping that encroaches in between that area, but in terms of the bulk and the mass, that's how we designed the house. Landscape plan. Just quickly, again, we're removing 7 significant trees. 6 of those trees are along the development area along the western property line. The north, we are relocating one incredible vine maple, which is this one. We're actually moving it here. And we'd actually talk to the neighbor about that as well. It's a beautiful tree, be much more visible. Right now it's kind of stuck off into the corner. On the east side, we're pruning. We're maintaining all of this vegetation and pruning, and we're adding some hedges as well. And on the south property line, we've got some screen walls, we've got some mechanical walls that are fairly deep into the ground, and we've got some walls, and we've got hedges that, and you'll see that I'm going to show a rendering what that looks like here in a minute. We've got some hedges that screen that mechanical wall and that screen wall. And then, of course, we're taking the house down here. We're keeping this all lawn area. Keep in mind, this is the property adjacent that is less than half the size. And so they will now be looking at a hedge and also have a rolling lawn that comes down to the building. So this is the view from the entry drive. And just a couple comments here. You can see we've got, it's heavily landscaped. The western property line is heavily vegetated currently. And by taking the 6 trees out, I think we still maintain just basically a green buffer. This is showing the house from the drive that actually accesses to the eastern access drive leading out to Overlake Drive West. This is a perspective from what would be the southeast corner looking at the house. And here are these walls that we talked about. And then this is a reflecting pond. It's not a pool, it's just a reflecting pond, and then there's a spa. And taken from what would be the southwest corner of the lot looking back at the house. Again, kind of showing you stepping off the patio, and then the lawn just continues on down to the bulkhead. And this is a very good overview of the house in the back, showing that you do have these screen walls, but you can see the heavy vegetation. We're actually creating an arborvitae hedge that matches the current neighbor's hedge. This is existing. We're going to match it on our side, and then we're going to vegetate in front of these screen walls. And that's the site plan review.
When are you going to do the screen wall? Because as a construction mitigation, which goes in today, that's what we're really interested in, how it affects the neighbors. And so is that going to be done first?
I'll let the contractor comment on that, if you don't mind. And then just to make a comment about, we had two informal meetings with neighbors because one of the, we went through a substantial development permit hearing, which was approved several months ago. And one of the comments was related to primarily construction traffic using both the west and east access lanes. So the contractor actually talked to their subcontractors, and they'll talk about this here in a minute. And they were able to devise a plan where only if necessary, larger trucks that require a permit, if we're having issues delivering on the west side, and they would notify the neighbors at the time we would be using the eastern access. And it was primarily a concern. There's a lot of driveways that back into that lane and then head out to Overlake Drive West. So there was just a safety concern, which is a valid concern. And that was the primary discussion we had with the neighbors.
You don't need your.
Wow.
Hi, I'm Eric Toth. I'm co-owner of Toth Construction and co-author of the CMP plan.
Sorry, before you begin, raise your right hands, both of you, if you're both testifying. Do you swear to tell the truth?
We do.
Great, thank you.
And this is Gary Worden. He is the project manager for the project and also co-author of the CMP plan. I was listening to some of the questions that came up earlier, anticipated those, and I can go ahead and start answering them, or
Well, make your presentation, what you felt you needed to present, and then we'll continue with our
Surely.
questions, please.
All right, I'm going to let Gary do the tech stuff, and I'm going to do the talking. Well, as Rick mentioned, and it was indicated that we had 2 neighborhood meetings to basically present our plan as we saw it to, establish the house.
Sorry.
Establish the most effective plan that we could for the neighborhood. We anticipated some things that we definitely heard back from the neighborhood. The 3 main things: inbound and outbound traffic. The original plan called for using, as you saw, there were both 2 lanes, one on the east side and one on the west side, and we anticipated using both. One is inbound on the east side and outbound on the west side. Some of the comments, one specific comment that was mentioned was concern about most of the neighborhood in that area accesses the westbound or the eastbound drive, so trucks traveling up on that with kids and school, as you mentioned earlier, were a concern. We were able to work with the subcontractors, move specific features around on the site, and I don't know if you want to go to the site plan.
I'm not quite sure how this is moved.
You might have to just pick the picture. There we go. You have one more. There you go.
Okay.
Just to point to something specific here, so we went ahead and moved dumpster, porta potties and the job site trailer down to this corner of the property to accommodate an inbound and a large enough area that the subcontractors figured out how to take trucks and turn them around in one zone without having to back up out of the east drive. Really only impacting one neighbor up on Overlap Drive directly, and that's leaving this area more or less unused. We anticipate 12 events where we might have to use this drive to get larger pieces of equipment in and out. Boom truck, for example, that's the crane. Things like that that don't turn around effectively. It is also possible to do a 3-point turn. It's just not as safe as just being able to drive directly out forward. We're also concerned about noise. That was an issue with the neighbors. The other reason for moving porta potties and job site trailer and all that down further toward the lake area is it gets further away from the neighborhood and a little bit more downslope. So little things that you don't normally anticipate. We heard back from the neighborhood like car alarm chirps, just keys rattling, guys, doors slamming, things like that. We suggested that to them and they liked that idea as well, so we went ahead and moved the plan around to make that work. And then also the parking area that you mentioned is down as far away from the rest of the neighborhood as possible.
And just to demonstrate, the neighbors that we're talking about are up here, here, and over here. So by relocating what we originally had planned for, the site trailer, porta potties, dumpster, parking up here, we relocated to the south end of the property to accommodate their requests.
So, last thing that was a major concern was the school, as you mentioned earlier. We did anticipate that as well, and it is a part of the CMP plan to, when you're at a certain proximity to the school, it's sort of baked into the plan to require what we need to have an awareness and a plan to prepare for both school start times and when dismissal times are, primarily for Medina Elementary, but also for VCS and St. Thomas. And VCS only has one bus stop that's along the truck travel route as it heads out to the major interchange at 405. Medina Elementary is the biggest one that we have to be concerned with, and their school start time is 8:05 Monday through Friday. It's a 2:35, I think, release time on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Fridays, and early release on Wednesday. The instructions to the truck drivers will be settle down, no truck driving during that time, half an hour period on either side of that. Other than that, we'll intend to operate normally. So, and then flaggers are also required. That's also built into the plan. We'll have flaggers anytime a truck is entering and exiting, whichever drive they're coming out of. But again, that'll be mostly the the west drive. And then for safety's sake, there's always an escort as a truck. If it has to back in or back up, there's an escort that is in addition to the flagger, either on site or in the lane.
And then one more thing, you might have already said it, but when you're not using the truck, you can shut them off.
Yeah, and that's actually indicated, no idling, none of that. So, also mentioned earlier, there was some discussion on your guys' part about what that 6:30 arrival time is. That is strictly for, and this is written into the plan, strictly for the superintendent and the foreman. Those are the two guys, as you guys sussed out, are the people who are just there to set up the site. That is quiet time.
The concern there was what you already brought up, which was the alarm chirps and the doors closing and that.
Yes.
You kind of, so you're against your, in other words, we're saying we don't want that, and then you're saying 6:30 for just
Well,
them.
absolutely. We don't want that happening up near the neighbors, and we'd like to have that happen as far away as possible. And then we still would like to have our lead staff there ahead of when the rest of the crew arrives, which is 7 o'clock start. That'll be 2 vehicles at most, and there's nothing we can do about the chirping other than telling them not to lock their cars or anything like that.
Crazy
So,
neighborhood.
yeah.
Here, Mr. Toth, where is, I apologize, I can't read where the construction trailer is, where you're,
construction trailer is indicated in red right here on
Got
the
it.
west property line.
Thank you.
Sure.
So when when the foreman and super come in, they'd park somewhere in that, where those black lines are,
Yes.
and then they just kind of get the site prepared, okay?
Yeah, we have pretty comfortable parking for 15 vehicles.
Yeah.
So, also be clear on that they're parking basically on top of where the current existing house is that we're leveling, and then we're gonna infill that zone, so it'll be both asphalt that is currently there, and then a gravel infill that everything parks on top of. All the lawn area that you saw in the pictures that is between that house and the lakeside,
It's basically
that remains untouched. That was something that was just recently done. We'll following all the BMPs and that are described to us in the TESC measures, and assuming, I don't have that plan in front of me, the lawn area is a pretty effective biomass. So I'm pretty sure the civil engineers are going to require that we just keep it there, don't touch it, silt fence it, wattle, all the things you do to prevent silt and get stuff from getting into the lawn area, but then use the lawn as a resource to filter water.
Questions?
Yeah, I'm glad you outlined that the lawn was staying in
Thanks.
place. That was my other main concern. It was also helpful to see where in relation to the school everything is. I don't know if it's required, but would it be beneficial to add like hay bales or additional mitigation measures in addition to the silt fence?
Johnson?
Yeah, we will follow any TESC measures that are required by permitting and civil.
That answer your question? There's a lot of rules that they already have to follow.
I'm
When I did my house, which is nowhere near the water, we put straw everywhere and it actually blew all over the neighborhood.
okay.
And I go, yeah. So, I understand what you're saying, but I've also been the one cleaning up the mess because it was on the weekend. So, I guess we'll just have you say it for us.
We rely on
Any necessary, if something comes up, you'll take care of it.
Absolutely, yeah. We take direction from the civil engineer, and there is a full civil engineering plan that describes all the measures that we need to take that follow the city codes.
This is a little bigger project than we're used to. This is,
So
they have
that's
a staff for all of this stuff.
yeah, but also like there's city code, but would you guys be willing to do in addition to the city code? Is that something that
They have a civil
Like-
engineer on site, so if the civil engineer, if something in the grass, if the grass starts turning brown, they will have them fix it. That's what
Okay.
they've already,
We can, in this,
we,
in the context of this hearing, we can't request
can't.
the
It's not
applicant to do
appropriate.
more than what's
Okay.
required by city
Okay.
code.
thank you.
So what we do is we would then get the code changed,
Yeah, no, I was just wondering if
so you know that there's a path.
I understand that. I was just
We will adhere to all codes and requirements by the geotech and civil engineers. Absolutely.
So the one question that does affect us, or the neighbors now, is the screening wall. And the pictures were really nice. It looks like it's gonna be a great screening wall, but when are you gonna build it? How are you mitigating during construction? Because it was really nice when it's done, but what are you doing during construction? Because that's what we're here for.
We have not made the final decision on sequencing for our permanent concrete screening walls. However, it's part of our discussion, ongoing discussion, as to whether we're going to put up temporary fencing with screening during construction until we've built the site walls. We do not have a final call on that at this
Yeah,
stage.
is it in your Gantt report? I didn't really look at it. I think, trim
I don't really-
landscaping's 27, so. Kind of close
Yeah.
to the bottom.
This Gantt chart isn't, it's not detailed enough to break out the
It's not
site
very
walls.
granular, right.
Right.
So that's something that is our purview, is to help the neighbors, and that is, we need that. What can we do there?
Well, we'll absolutely put up temporary construction fencing with screening until the site walls are built.
That's indicated in the plan and both on the plan and in the narrative.
Okay. One of the questions, and just because I was we've been doing a lot of stuff with this, is views. It's all, you talk to the neighbors, obviously that's been accommodated in the construction. I mean, I'm just asking, that is a lot of our purview, but has that been accommodated and accounted for in this?
You mean during construction?
Well, no, at the end of it, just, we've got a particular neighbor that you talked about arborvitaes, and there's a resident that planted some arborvitaes that are now 40 feet tall, and they're blocking 100 people's views. So, in your landscaping plan, have you thought of 10 years out? I'm just asking this because it's an issue elsewhere. Okay, we'll bring it. That's fine.
Well, we can turn it over to the design team.
This is kind of a preemptive question 10 years from now.
Yeah, typically what I've seen, and we haven't actually discussed this with the neighbors, there's some sort of a hedge height covenant where they agree on a height that.
So the neighbors have done this because it's not.
They haven't done it on this property, but that's what I've seen on I've worked on a lot of projects in the area.
That's what I'm saying, there isn't one, is what I'm getting at.
No, there's not. And actually, so there's a current hedge on the property to the west, and they maintain it at a certain height just on their own. And obviously our hedge, we only want it to grow up high enough so that there's proper screening. The higher it goes, the more view it blocks from, our project too, so.
Chair Schubring, the 50-foot hedge was Leland cypress, not.
Oh, Leland's, okay.
Yeah, not Pyramidales. So.
Okay. So we're just so it's a preemptive, so when you're doing this, if you have a choice,
Yeah,
think about 10 years out.
I suspect there's gonna be some sort of agreement written between neighbors. That's typically what I see.
Okay, and we're just asking because it's not our purview.
Yeah.
It's kind of a preemptive 10-year out. There's a lot of people that are
Yes.
a lot of grief about
Yeah,
this.
well, and it's an important issue. I know that there's one covenant I was aware of here a couple years ago on a project we worked on that they had a covenant going back 40 years, and they had specific requirements, and both neighbors kind of kept each other accountable. So, I suspect that's what will occur on this project. So.
Brady, would you please address our absent?
So I just said on behalf of Mark Nelson, he had a commissioner that's absent. He had a specific question about screening for 7737 Overlake Drive West. Do you believe that what you have in place sufficiently screens for that property during construction? I'm speaking about a specific property now, 7737.
That's the property that's straight to the east. So the long area and then the smaller block.
Yeah. Oh, Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Commissioner Nelson felt that property was particularly
It's
exposed.
the closest, it is. So that's the area where we are considering the right path forward with regard to either pouring site walls early or doing our temporary construction fencing with screening until we're ready to pour those site walls. So to answer your question, at this stage, we'll make accommodations to install 6-foot construction fencing with screening until we're ready for the concrete.
Have you been in communication with those neighbors?
We've been in communication with his son. He's in Sweden for an extended period. His son came over for our neighbor, question and answer session, and he expressed those concerns to us.
This is a large part of what we do is the community involvement with this.
Absolutely.
It sounds like you guys did a really good job ahead of time. We've had one where the room's full.
Thank you.
People complaining. So good job.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, so
That addresses all of
that
Mr. Nelson's.
addresses all of
Yes.
Mr. Nelson. Okay, that's our absent. We already said that there's not really any geotech that.
And can I interject real quick?
Yes.
With regard to the concrete site walls that separate this project from the Johnson residence, one of their concerns was that we have adequate green screening, so they're not looking at concrete walls, which is it's in our landscape plan. So there will be, in addition to the concrete, we will have green screening as well.
Something else that's come up in a few of these, but you already addressed it, is the porta potties and the dumpsters are put in a place that was agreed upon with the neighbors?
Yes.
They're necessary, just, so that's mitigated. The cranes were already, that's in the plan.
Correct, yeah, and the crane we refer to is a boom truck, so it's not a permanent fixture or a semi-permanent fixture. It comes when necessary and then rolls out. And that be one of those events that needs to use the east drive to get in and out. In the plan as well as an aerial plan of where the boom will swing.
Can you point me to that plan? I haven't been able to find the actual
I
plan in
don't
the materials
have
that I was
your-
given, so.
So I can't reference your plan exactly. Oh, actually, wait a minute. What page is it in ours?
It's in the full tailored construction, mitigation plan, not in, yeah, it's not in this electronic version.
It is, it's the site plan, the red box in the middle, and then,
So I believe we previously had
Well, it
submitted.
just says C crane
where
plan
it will be
on that.
located. Oh,
We don't have it in here.
I haven't found it, and it's,
Laurel, are you referring to the crane?
yeah, I mean, we don't have an Exhibit 11, and then someone said it was Exhibit 5, but Exhibit 5 says to look in the plan narrative, and I haven't found it in the materials that I have, so,
It might not be in there, but just,
okay.
if it's not, we can enter it as an exhibit, and we do have extra copies of this.
Oh, so does this show,
This is the landing spot for where the crane would sit.
okay,
This is the reach of the boom out to that.
this is the reach here. Okay, maybe I do have that somewhere and didn't understand it. Yeah, I do, I have it right here, and I just didn't understand what I was looking at. Okay, thank you. That would have been page 128 of 214. Thanks.
Okay,
Do you have any more?
I don't think so. Do you have any other questions?
Yes?
I was just curious on the parking, and I think you have done a good job situating it away from almost everybody, but it is quite close to that one existing house. So going back to the hours, I noticed in Exhibit 5, the work will end no later than 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, which is actually, I think, an hour earlier than our code requires. And I was wondering if that was an outcome of the discussion with the neighbors, or if you could bump the start time, bump your arrival time to 7 and your start time to 7:30 and go to 6:30 and just make it not quite so early for the neighbors to have the noise of the arrival noise.
Actually, the end time was more of a function of the subcontractor reality, and where they needed to be ending their day. And we're not going to have anybody working later than that, just the way they set up their crews. So
Okay.
we back-timed it that way to see if we could get in just a little bit early. And we totally understand that we're asking for something that is beyond what the code typically requires.
More questions? Any?
Yeah.
You good? Keep
Um,
going.
Yeah, that was really my only question. So just to make sure that I understand that you're saying that the neighbors are on board with the 6:30 arrival time.
I can add, they have all received in sort of an advance copy of the plan, and we haven't received any direct feedback on the negative side of that.
Okay. So and then I think I just want to echo the thanks on your outreach to the neighbors, your proactive discussions. It's really helpful and appreciated.
Thank you.
Guess we're done. You guys?
Thank you. Thank you.
Good. There's no other input, okay.
is there public testimony?
Well, right, do we have any public, do you have any papers, any of the forms filled out for public? Do we have any public discussion? Anybody here from the public? so it's to us to discuss. So the only thing I come up with was a temporary screening wall, but that's part of this already, isn't it? The screening wall's already established?
It is. Would you like to make a motion?
A motion to discuss the possible amendments to the CMP 18-017.
I move to approve CMP 18-017
Second.
and PL 18-035.
Now a second.
Any amendments? Any
Yeah,
proposed amendments?
Yeah, the only thing I had was that temporary screening wall. Does anybody have that other amendment? This is a pretty large lot, so our purview or our charge of mitigating this construction, they've done a good job of it. It's not, I mean, even the neighbor over there that looks close is actually kind of far away in Medina. I mean, for Medina, I mean, I was 10 feet away in the neighbor's house, so it was 20 feet to the neighbor's house, and they're 20 feet to the line. So this one, they actually have adequate parking. I mean, this one's easier than most for us.
I just wanted to compliment the applicant in, doing this for so long. This has to be one of the best presentations we've had. So we really appreciate it. Makes our job a lot easier. Thank you for that. But I did want to get back to the central question, discuss the central question of the start time, but also also specifically number 3, staff recommendation, still seems incomplete. It has a start time, but it doesn't have an end time, nor does it refer to the 6:30. We have it in the staff analysis, but no one's told me yet if that having it in the staff analysis is sufficient. We can just leave it at that. So there's kind of a two-part question. Does the commission want to discuss the 6:30 start time? 1, and 2, is the staff recommendation 3 sufficient in its scope? Ms. Hayworth, maybe you could comment on the latter.
Yes, so it does look like we omitted one of our typical conditions, which is, you could look at page 11 of your packet, agenda item 1, condition 3, says noise generating work, including delivery of materials or equipment, shall not occur prior to 7 a.m. Monday through Friday, or 8 a.m. on Saturday, nor after 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, or 5 p.m. on Saturday. Work is not permitted on Sundays without express written authorization from the city. This is restatement of the noise requirements set forth in 8.06 in the Medina Municipal Code. So you could duplicate that condition exactly, but the current condition number 3 in the staff report for the Cobalt One Trust project is intended specifically to cover that half an hour gap between arrival and work start time.
How do we answer this with, with the start time? Is this an amendment? Is it covered 8.06 in MMC?
Well, I wanted to bring up, so that seems to be, that's an adequate explanation. I wanted to bring up the 6:30 because Laurel's brought it up a couple times. Personally, I don't have an issue with it because I think the applicant is going to, notwithstanding, it's different than what we've done on many projects in the past. We have made exceptions in the past. I think this particular applicant will be especially responsible. And if there are issues, I think they're gonna make it right. At least that's my impression. But I wanted to get everyone else's comments because we can always change that. That's something that we can do. The applicant mentioned that they're asking for an exception, so we could change that if we wanted to. So I wanted to bring that up.
I think they've done a fairly good job of outreach to the neighbors and accommodation of the neighbors' requests. I mean, I personally, I don't like tractor trucks arriving at 6:30, but I think they've laid everything out and worked with the neighbors pretty well. It's pretty.
Oh, echoing, I personally, if I were living next to it, would prefer to have that extra half hour in the morning, but I think there's a provision somewhere that says if complaints arise, then we can start out with this, since good outreach has been done and the neighbors haven't objected, then we can start this way, and if complaints arise, they'll be adjusted.
Ms. Hayworth, is there such a provision that
I believe there's a condition of approval that says that the director can apply additional mitigation measures.
It's point number 18, I think, if I'm reading that correctly. The director may apply additional construction mitigation measures meeting the requirements in MMC 1520 to the project if additional construction impacts are identified once construction commences. So I don't know if that would qualify as an additional impact if we've already approved it, but.
Well, construction won't start till, so
It would-
that fine line between what's work.
Right,
What
yeah.
are we defining as work?
So work is, in the code, is construction-related activities. Historically, this body has allowed site walks and other types of activities that are non-noise generating. So that would be the distinction, is things that generate typical construction noise, or at least that's the distinction that's been used.
Is it written in, is it already in here somehow? Or do we need to put it in? I believe it should already be in. That's a definition of the code, or one of the definitions as part of the code.
I think if you duplicated our typical noise generating work condition as a condition of approval of this application, that would cover it. Yeah, so again, if you look at, or I guess it's page 15 of 214, condition number 3, if you just use that language verbatim on this application, I think that would cover your intention. It specifically calls out noise generating work.
So you're referring back to
The other CMP.
Yeah, it's
you're
it's
referring to
very,
part 7, staff recommendation number 3.
yes, it's very like boilerplate language applicable to all of them, and I'm not sure how it got omitted from this one, but that was an oversight.
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can replicate that language verbatim for this.
So just out of curiosity, so why are these so different? Did like 3 different people write them, or because this set of recommendations is very different from this set?
They're
Why
very
didn't we
different.
have why didn't we? I know, but why didn't we have boilerplate language for about this just transposed to the next one? Was it an omission, or was someone trying to craft specific? Because on the second one, we've got the staff recommendation number 3, and it doesn't have a stop time. Why didn't we use this 3 and put it over on this 3?
So that's our goal. I'm not sure how it dropped off, but the 3 for agenda item 2 for Cobalt One Trust, condition number 3 is specifically intended to address something that's not on the table for the Songming staff report. They're not proposing an early arrival time.
Yeah.
So it's a situation that doesn't appear on the other CMP. It's only, so that condition was to address something unique for the Cobalt One project, and we accidentally omitted our
So-
typical
For tonight.
condition.
So you're saying we could simply move this 3 over to this 3? and
Yeah,
we'd be
you could
good?
duplicate it specifically. Yeah, we try and use consistent conditions and consistent language, and every once in a while, we accidentally delete something.
Okay, so for today, how do we, without me having to write that paragraph, how do I make
So
that one of our
I
amendments?
can make an amendment that
Right, so. we'll
Kristen
follow-
can
right.
interpret.
We have
So-
the language exactly, so we
So
can.
we would simply, I make a motion, an amendment
And I can send you
to-
that 'cause I have this.
to take the language from the previous CMP, number 3, relating to noise generating work, and just transfer it to the new one. So we're
17.
basically copying number 3.
005, number 3. 3 is it on page 15 of 214.
Do you want me to read it so it's on
It's
the record?
page 15 of, it's page 15 of 214,
Yeah.
and we're just moving that to become the number 3 on page 96 of 214.
It's probably clearer to just read the language that you are intending to add as a new condition of approval.
I believe that on page 15, it does not mention 6:30 unless I read it improperly. That may be the one difference.
Yeah, we still have to address
Right,
that.
That's what they're asking for.
No,
That
I
is
know
different.
that, but I mean that, if you transfer from 15 to this, it does not address the
We still,
6:30.
I think then we still have to
You
address
still
that.
have to.
At that point, so you're correct.
So just to clarify for everybody, the first thing we're going to do is make an amendment to include the regular construction work hours as a condition. It would be condition 21 currently as part of this CMP. Does that sound like what everyone's trying to do?
No,
Okay.
no, I don't think so.
That's not what you want to do.
Well,
I
I mean,
think it
It's- We have 20 staff workers, so this is the 21st condition.
well, what I was saying is it would just take the place of number 3.
And so that would mean it would,
Condition is replacing.
Correct.
but now you're getting rid of their option to do 6:30. So would you then do another amendment?
We would.
As,
We will, but
as
let's
amendment
get
21?
completely through 21, and then
Okay.
we'll start 22.
So is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
So amendment 21, okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
So amendment 21 for the record.
All right. Noise generating work, including delivery of materials or equipment, shall not occur prior to 7 a.m. Monday through Friday, or 8 a.m. on Saturday, nor after 7 p.m. through Friday or 5 p.m. on Saturday. Work is not permitted on Sundays without the express written authorization from the city.
21, thank you.
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you, Kristen.
Okay, but 19 and 20 are conditions related to site plan review, so I think if we make it 21, it's a little confusing. I think it belongs as ahead of that.
We can renumber them. So we'll add this as a condition of approval and renumber appropriately.
Let's get back to the 6:30 thing again. And if everyone's comfortable with 6:30, as I personally am, since we have some director discretion, then we wouldn't change it.
Okay, and you?
It seems like the neighbors are okay with that based on the,
How many showed up?
yeah. Well, based on the reporting that we
Okay.
heard.
I'm with 6:30, and with director's discretion, and this is complaint driven. So if the neighbors complain, you're out. So that's just the way it works.
Oh, it's fine. I mean, I still think it's early. I think, I really appreciate how you went to the neighbors and did that piece of it. I'm not sure that they saw that, maybe because you gave them the documents, but whether they actually saw the 6:30. In retrospect, it would have been nice if you'd gotten feedback on that, but in the meantime, I guess we'll let it go. I mean, it's okay.
I'm willing to go with it for now.
Okay, so looks like we have consensus. I don't know that we need to vote on it.
Can I add something really quickly? So just to make sure that the director's discretion in 18 can apply to number 3, I would suggest, just for clarity for everyone who ever reads this, that we would revise it to say subject to section, condition 18. Just to make sure it's clear for everybody that it's tied together. That's all. So that if anyone does have concerns,
I
they
think that's a
can.
good idea.
Okay, so
They can-
condition 22, 6:30 start time, subject to condition number 18.
I was just going to revise it at number 3. So we still have number 3, or did we get rid of number 3? I think
I
you
think
have
we
it.
can just retain the original number 3
Right.
with the
And
subject to the
refer.
Correct. Yeah.
conditions. And
You-
then,
So, more
You-
importantly, Kristen,
I
you
got it.
know what we're trying to do.
Yep, I do. I know exactly what you guys are doing.
That's a really good idea, thank you.
Okay, so, we have a motion, we have a second, we have 2 amendments.
sorry,
Kristen,
what are the
what are the?
Just one.
You want me to
Is it
read it
just
again?
one amendment, or is it 2?
There's 2, the one that I read, and then we're adding the additional language
Okay, so
to number
are we
3.
calling them 21 and 22 tonight, and then you're gonna revise the numbers as you finish, or
No, we
what are we calling?
revised 3,
What
and then
we'll,
we
what
added
we'll
21.
do, if it's okay with
That's what we're trying to get through.
when I do
last
the
time.
minutes, when I do the minutes and I put how you guys, sometimes I have to rearrange things. So I will add as I read on the record, and
Yep.
that will be, it'll just state additional condition, and it'll state that. And then it'll say on condition number 3, adding the language subject to director discretion.
Subject to condition 18.
Subject
And
condition
then
18, okay, so additional condition number 3, subject condition number 18. Okay, so 21, which you read, 22 for tonight, or additional subject to number, condition number 3, condition 18. So,
So we don't necessarily have to number them.
well, I just wanna make sure we're clear, so when I ask for the vote, we know what we're voting on. Does everybody seem clear with what we're voting on?
Very clear, yes.
Okay,
Wait, I'm sorry, I'm not clear, so I just want to make sure I'm clear, because it's my next on the line here, along with yours. So we have 21, which is the new condition.
new paragraph.
Yeah, the new paragraph. Then we are amending condition number 3 to include this language. We are not adding a condition 22.
There is no
There is
22.
no
Excellent.
22.
Thank you.
Item 22.
Item 22.
Item 22, after condition 20. All 4.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. None.
Congratulations.
None. Go. Build it.
Go forth and build.
Okay.
With that, we're here next week,
On the 23rd,
the 23rd.
okay.
Need motion.
Motion to adjourn?
second?
Laurel seconded.
Janie's motion.
All 4?
Aye.
Aye.
Nobody's against it.